Hi, this is Starkie Sowers. Welcome again to another Plus Program training series. Today's topic, Neuro-Endocrine System, and this is what we call Part 1. So when we think of the nervous system and the endocrine system together, we call it the Neuro-Endocrine System. So remember, when you think of the Neuro-Endocrine System, think of like the World Wide Web, www. whatever it is. That's what your system is in the body when it comes to nerves and it comes to the hormone system or the endocrine system. It's what communicates and makes everything kind of work together and kind of congruently. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of look at these things piece by piece. And today's topic is going to be on the nervous system. So when we look at the nervous system, as well as the endocrine system, there's three functions that they're always trying to do on a regular basis. Number one, communicate. So they're communicating on a regular basis every second that you're awake and every second that you're asleep. They're constantly communicating. So when we look at communication, think of, for instance, like mind to muscle, the thought of maybe catching a glass before it falls off the counter. That's mind to muscle. And so they're communicating, hey, you know what the brain says? Activate and move, the muscle moves. All right, so then integration. Integration is where the cells, as well as the whole body, is kind of working together. One thing I like to think of is the immune system. The immune system is always integrated. It's always feeling for responses, whether it needs to have inflammation or whether it needs to regulate itself and maybe attack some type of an invader that's coming in. So you've got to have what we call local networks that are constantly in integration and communication, so we know when these invaders are coming in. And then finally, regulation. So when we think of regulation, think of metabolism, think of digestion. Those are some very key points when it comes to the whole neuroendocrine system. And those things are functioning all the time, as we said, on a regular basis, every second of your lifespan, so to speak. All right, so let's kind of tear it apart a little bit. Let's look at the nervous system a little bit more detail. So when we look at the nervous system, we look at the central nervous system, which is the first or the primary portion, which is the brain and the spinal cord. So when we look at the brain and the spinal cord, those are nerves going out as well as nerves coming in. So the peripheral nervous system is what we call the input as well as the reception area. And so when we touch something, we're getting some sensations. Those communications are being sent to the brain in different ways. You might be like it's hot, so it's got to respond and move away. It also might be something that feels good, so you want to stay and, oh, wow, that's someone's tickling my back. That feels amazing. So that's the peripheral nervous system. And then there's also what we call the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, you have to say that 3 times. Autonomic nervous system is what we call the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And what that does is that regulates digestion, it regulates cellular metabolism, and it also works on a couple other different things such as blood pressure as well as body temperature. So those things are always in action and working together. So when I think of the nervous system, I think of a couple things. Number one, the nerves themselves can be anywhere from like a millimeter in length, so that's really, really tiny, all the way up to maybe 18 or 24 inches in length. And so when we think of that, there's a very huge diversity. And like I said, remember this to be almost like the World Wide Web, where the body's constantly connected with this nervous system. So one thing that I want to do, though, is let's look at some of those nerves. And a lot of the nerves have what we call myelin sheaths, and they also have what they call axons. And the way that the nerves communicate between themselves is actually electrical impulses. So there's like a light electrical impulse that's going on. And so believe it or not, your body is literally electricity. The communication system is literally electricity. So when we think of that, we look at these nerves, and what makes them so essential to function is having the right amount of nutrients, so to speak, to build them. So that's where I always think. When I think of the nervous system as, well, wait a minute, I know it does all these wonderful things and all these cool things, but I want to know what's needed for me to have a healthy nervous system. Well, a couple things. Number one, in order for that nerve cell to be able to function properly, it has to grow what we call Schwann cells or myelin sheath. In order for that to happen, you got to have some building blocks. And those building blocks are going to be specific omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. That's the reason why omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids are essential. We've got to have them for different functions. And here we're seeing an immediate play on the body when we have the bricks and mortar, so to speak, so these omega-6 and omega-3s, we actually provide or build the proper nervous system. Now, in order for these things to function, we also have to have the electrical impulses between the nerves themselves. So think of this, kind of like a light switch that you have like in one of your rooms. You turn on the power, so to speak, and boom, a light lights up. Well, the same thing happens here. Some of these nerves, as we said, are very short or they can be very long, but they actually terminate and they actually stop. There's these little tiny gaps in between them. So in order for the electricity to continue, so to speak, there has to be what we call a neurotransmitter to transmit either a stimulating response or maybe a relaxing response. So in order to do that, there's certain amino acids that we have to have that come in play. So a couple ones that come off real quick. We need GABA as well as tryptophan to kind of relax or calm down the body to produce serotonins and kind of help regulate and calm the body. We also need what we call the amino acids phenylalanine as well as tyrosine to kind of stimulate what we call epinephrine or increase the excitatory neurotransmitters. Additionally, acetylcholine, which of course is the vitamin B choline, helps with the production of acetylcholine, kind of helps to regulate back and forth these neurotransmitters, kind of activate the brain to the body response. So all of a sudden, we're starting to see we need fatty acids, we need omega-6s, we need omega-3s. We also need adequate amounts of proteins, which of course have amino acids that provide these neurotransmitters for the body to produce. Now, there's also some regulatory components such as calcium and magnesium, which kind of help to balance the body's neurotransmitters, not too overexcited, not too calming. So calcium and magnesium become some critical factors as well. And finally, B vitamins. I think B vitamins get gobbled up on a regular basis, especially if you're under stress when it comes to the nervous system for building it. So what does that look like? Well, that means you're going to have a diet that's got adequate amounts of omega-3s and omega-6s, as well as B vitamins. So that means unprocessed grains, nuts, fruits, and vegetables and things of that nature, and adequate amounts of protein coming from milk and dairy and other different types of components such as vegetarian sources as well, nuts and seeds. So that at least gives you kind of fill, so to speak, for all the food groups that are going to be necessary to keep your what we call the neurological system back in balance. This is Starkie Sowers. Thanks for watching another Plus Program training series.